The pink chair is back and the pink headphones.
Yeah.
We got actually two more people to join us today yet because we added one to the class, which I think, today I think is the last day to do that, right? To add, yeah, that's what I thought. Was hoping I'd get one more. If I got up to 8, I got paid more, but that didn't happen. Let's see. Hey, there's one. Looking for Jaden's here. Oh, Taylor. That's who we're missing. Taylor. Okay. Well, we'll give her a second or two here. Maybe running late. Maybe isn't going to make it. It's hard to say. Well, everybody, welcome Chris. We've got a new victim for this semester. Chris is, well, as most of you probably know him. I think a lot of you were in the same class last year. Beth, you might be the only one who wasn't in. You were a couple semesters ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of the rest of these were in last semester's class. So everybody else knows Chris, but you don't. Or, well, you might, but
Oh well.
just don't
Hello,
from
Chris.
class. All right, so we're a couple minutes after, so hopefully Taylor will show up, but we'll, because I would like to find out some things about the assignment that you guys submitted, which we're going to do first, as always. Take a look at those. All right. Just organizing my screens here. All right, so Chris, first of all, good job for coming in at the 11th hour and still getting the assignment in. That was that was pretty good. Did you go back and watch the class videos? Is that how you figured all that out?
Yeah, well, honestly, I kind of hope I did it right, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, you did. We'll talk about it in a minute, but you did something. I wanted everybody to do something a little bit different than what we did in class, and for the most part, I think you all did. And we'll take a look at what those are here. Actually, pretty much right now. Let me get that window up. And there's Taylor. All right. So again, if you, for those of you that joined right at 4 o'clock, you do get the $10,000 in cash. It'll be mailed to you. If you came in late, I'm sorry you missed out on that, but maybe next time. Sorry, I just have an evil streak in me. All right, so we're gonna jump into bridge right off the bat here. All right, so let's start with the images that are loose. I have some in folders and some are a little bit loose. Let's start with the loose ones. So Haley, that puts you first. I guess you did figure out eventually what you were missing.
Yeah.
Was it a key, one of the keys?
Yeah, I didn't know I had to press command too, and then I had to figure out what was command on my computer because I got confused, and then yeah, it worked, but at the same time, like the way that you just press the buttons and it turned for you, I couldn't do that. I had to turn 10 degrees every single time, so that took a while.
Oh yeah, I would say. No, yeah, those 4 keys should, assuming that you do the first one, that's the key. If you do the first one with the rotation, then every time you do that 4 key combination, it should, but in your case, it actually kind of maybe worked to your advantage a little bit because you didn't, it looks to me like we have an interesting swirl here, but it didn't reduce in size the way it normally would have. If you had done like a 90% on the first one, that would have done another 90 all the way down. So there's no right or wrong. The fact is that yours is just different. And so now I know why it's different because it was rotating, but it wasn't reducing in size as well. So what is it that we started with here? I'm not quite sure what we've got here.
So I took a water bottle and I filled it with water and I put it in front of my white trash can, and then I asked my roommate to put some food coloring in it while I take pictures, and that's basically what that is.
So yeah, it's again, normally this technique turns something into an abstract just simply because we're only using the outer 10% of each image as it rotates in. In your case, you created all that manually. You know, the food coloring sort of gave you that what's the word I'm looking for? Surrealistic look without the advantage of dropping it down the way you normally did. So the center image that we're looking at here, is that pretty much what the image looked like?
Yep, basically that and the white background, and then I
Okay.
just took that image in the middle, and that's what I turned. I didn't turn the whole image.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, so it was just the water bottle part that you turned. Gotcha. Well, no, it works. I mean, this is so subjective. There's really no, you can't really look at it and say, well, you did this right and you did that wrong. There is no right or wrong here. I think it's all personal preference. When I look at it, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I hate to even say anything because it's just completely personal. I initially think, wow, I'd like to have seen it maybe shrunk just a little bit so that it didn't make contact with the top and bottom. But then if you did that, I might have said, it would have been really cool if you'd have expanded. So it's so close that you can't really judge it by that. But I do like the fact that it's not the standard look that we had with all of our images last week. I like the fact that you separated the water bottle from the background, which gave it a real clean look. So yeah, you did what I wanted you to do, and did it in a little bit of a creative way. The food coloring was an interesting take on it. In fact, if you had done this exactly like we did in class last week, it would have been cool, but any image kind of turns like that when you do that technique. So the fact that we're seeing a lot of this in the center, that's sort of what makes you look at it and go, okay, what is that? Because otherwise you'd be like, well, I'll never figure it out anyway. But in this case, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I can see a good bit of that image. Looks like is it a reflection, or are we seeing through the image in the center, those vertical streaks of light?
Yeah, I think that might just be a reflection of the light on the bottle.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. All right, so cool. And again, the choice of color is interesting. Color is always interesting in the choices that we make. So we've got, warm tones with the yellows, and we've got somewhat cooler tones with the greens, which contrast against each other really nice. So good job. I do like what you came up with.
I like it.
All right, so Jaden also has a loose image here, so we're going to look at hers next. And again, this is kind of what I wanted to see, was taking the technique and doing something with it as part of a broader image. And again, when I think we talked, no, it was actually in Tuesday's class, there was somebody who had done a bit of a facial close-up of somebody, and it was a kind of a snapshot, but it was cropped in very tight, not quite this tight. But I commented that, we're so unused to seeing images that way, portrait images in that tight, that it kind of commands a little bit of attention, and it creates tension in the image because it feels crowded to us. We want to, naturally want to feel like we have room to expand, and we don't in an image like this. So anyway, I like the fact that the eyes was it's kind of an interesting choice, and almost a natural choice to do something like this. Jaden, how did you come up with, I mean, was it just like, hey, this is what I'll do, or did you start playing with it and this is where you ended up?
I played with it a lot, and that's just how it ended up.
Okay, so well, that's honest at least. It's, it's not like you said, well, I had this great idea and I worked it and I worked it and I worked it and I finally got what I wanted. Doesn't matter. When it comes to art, there are times, I guess I've done both, I guess I've got a concept that I'm trying to work on now that is just kicking my butt because I've got a lot of technical issues that I have to solve. And then there are other things where I just sit down and 5 minutes later throw a bunch of stuff together and bam, there it is. That's just the way it goes. But so yeah, it's interesting using it for the eye. I like the fact that we still see both the iris and the pupil here, and the design is just sort of overlaid onto it. What did you use for your original image? Was it something that was it maybe your image from last week, or was something new?
I used a picture of a moth that I had.
A moth. Okay, well, I can see the colors for that. Yeah, cool. It's interesting too. The colors are. Did you apply any a blending mode or anything, or is there more than one? I'm looking to see why we have a different color in the iris of the eye than we do in the pupil of the eye. Is it because of a blending mode, or is this two images that you put together? I'm not sure.
The pupil swirl is different from the iris swirl, and I used an overlay for both of them.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I wondered because it's obvious that there's something different, obviously, and if you look closely enough, you can see they really don't line up. So it does make sense that they're two different images. All right, cool. Not really much more I can. Oh, there is one thing, one minor thing that if I were gonna critique, I would tell you to change. Anybody want to take a guess what it might be?
Is it the light in the pupil?
Yeah, I would have probably taken that out just because, again, it's the brightest thing in the image. And it's small, so it's not a huge distraction. But if I envision this one of two ways, either without it in there or with it dead center right on the apex of that swirl, then I think I'd like it. It might be okay to be in there then. But the fact that it's off center a little bit, I probably would have just, retouched that out real easily.
I actually took it out of the first eye, and then I didn't like how it looked, just black. So then I put it in. But I think if I put it in the middle, like you said, it would have been better.
Yeah, I think that's probably, that would have been the better choice, I think, rather than removing it, would have put it to put it right where that swirl meets. But yeah, minor thing, not a big deal at all. Don't worry about that. All right, so we're gonna go up the ladder here. So this is Alana's original image that she used. This is the swirl that she created from it. And then she took this image, which she plagiarized from herself from last season, from last semester, and did both a black and white and a color version of that. Let me put them up side by side here. Which one do you like better, the black and white or the color?
The color one, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn. I think I like the background better in black and white, but I like the tone that you've given, you yourself and the shoe and all of that in the color one. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're both pretty good. I don't have a problem with either one. So yeah, using the image as a background is probably the first thing that I would have thought to try. It does require a little bit. How did you, oh wait, you do have did you not send the PSD? No, somebody else did. No, there's no PSD. How did you mask yourself? Did you, I'm just curious as to how you got yourself knocked out there.
So I selected the inside of the mirror and then copied the swirl and then pasted it in there.
I'm just looking at some of the edges. So there's a couple of ways to do that. And I don't know how hard what you did was, but let me show you what I probably would have done. Let me see, we've got your, yeah, let me open these up and I'll share that screen. We'll just real quickly go into that. All right, so we should be seeing two images, both your swirl and then if I can get to my other image here, the mirror. So can you see both images there?
Yeah.
Okay. So the image of yourself is actually, it lends itself really well to this technique. Sorry, hang on, let me make one adjustment here. Okay, it lends itself really well because of the fact that there's a lot of contrast here. And what I probably would have done is take the quick selection tool, which is nested in with the healing brush. And I would have gotten a brush, you know, I don't know, something like that size. And all I would do would be click and drag, like I'm not releasing the mouse, I'm just dragging around the gray part. I just did touch you a little bit, so I'm gonna have to go back and fix that. And then for this little area in here, zoom in on that, take a smaller brush and I would either hold the shift key down, or in this case, I don't have to. I don't know how well you can see, but if you look in the upper left-hand corner where the options bar is, there are three options for most of these tools. One is to create a new selection, one is to add to the selection, and one is to subtract from the selection. And the add to the selection is highlighted, so that's the one that's there. In fact, if you look, you can see that's not a crosshair necessarily in the middle of the brush, it is a plus sign. If I took the other one, you'd see a minus sign. So that's kind of a little visual clue as to what's going to happen here. So if I drag in there, I'll create that. And then there's a little bit of overspill. So I would have to hold down the option key to reverse that and drag, because you can see there's not a lot of contrast between your shoulder and the background. So you have to kind of be careful of that area. And then same thing on your finger, just to try to get that out of the selection. I see a little bit at the top of the camera was selected, and it should have been, and also the top of your head. So I'm holding down the option, it would be the Alt key in Windows, and just refining that selection. That's a quick down and dirty way. And then for hair, there's kind of a cool thing built into this. While this is all selected, actually, I'm going to go do the tops of your fingertips as well. Just removing those from the selection because of the highlight. Whoops, went a little too far there. But it's easy to go back and forth if you mess up. So while the selection is made, if you go again up to the options bar, there is a little button that says select and mask. And when you click that, what you have selected looks normal and what isn't selected turns red. And the cool thing is you can take that cursor and just drag it around the edge of your hair, and it will sort of magically alter the selection. We'll go to this little area down here too. And even probably here, I can probably, at least to some extent, I can add a little bit of to the selection there. And as I look, I can see that there's a couple of areas that I don't really like. So I'll hit OK to come out of that. And then there's another option. I can go into what's called quick mask mode by hitting the Q key. And it looks the same, but the difference is that what happens this time, if I take a paintbrush and I have black as my foreground color, I can just paint in. So I'm just using basically a paintbrush to refine my selection. First, I use the select and mask tool, and then I'll use the paintbrush. And of course, you'd want to do this at a high magnification. And when you're in these areas like this, you'd use a very small paintbrush. And I'm not going to be real fine with it here. if I want to remove something, I would just hit the X key and change my foreground color to white, because if I paint with white, I remove. If I paint with black, I add. So we'll stop it there. I'll come back out of Quick Mask. And now, and I probably should have refined this little edge down here with the shoelace and so forth, but I just want to show you real quickly that I have a selection of you. And if I go into my layers palette here, what I'm going to do is, there's a couple of ways I can do this. I could copy, like you did, copy the other image and paste it into this. But I think to have more flexibility, to be able to refine this even a little bit more, I'm going to create a layer mask. And I just click the layer mask button, which is the third one from the left in the bottom of the layers palette. And what it does is it creates this little mask icon on my layer and shows me that the only thing it's kept here is the background, and it's kind of knocked everything else out. But I actually want the opposite of that. So I'm just going to invert that. And on a Mac, it's just Command I to invert the mask. If you watch the little mask icon in my layers palette, when I do that, you'll see the black will change to white and the white will change to black. You see what's happening in the layers palette there? So I want that checkerboard pattern, which is the transparent areas. I want that to be on the background because that's where I'm going to bring the other image from. So whoops. Let's stop sharing my screen. So let me go back in. So I'm just going to, I can copy and paste, I can drag and drop. Let me see if I can, I don't know if it'll show you both windows. I'm going to try and do that because I'd like to do a drag and drop. All right, let me get out of. Every time I change something in there, it stops sharing that screen. Try it one last time here. So there's my image of you. There's the image of the swirl on top. I'm just going to take the move tool and drag that over. Well, that's kind of a cool effect. It's probably going to stop sharing. No, it didn't. It's still sharing, correct? You can still see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can take that mask now and I can drag it up onto this area or onto the layer. And then again, I can invert it so that we have what we want. We have the background. So it seems like a lot of steps, but it's actually really simple. Like I probably would have taken me literally just a minute, under a minute to probably do this. And the cool thing is that I've got all this flexibility now because when I zoom it in, you can see it did a pretty good job on the edges of your hair, but we have a little bit of your arm showing through. So I can just go on that layer mask and take a white paintbrush. Oops, sorry, black paintbrush. And I can paint your arm back in because what a layer mask does, obviously, it doesn't erase anything. It just temporarily hides it. So just by painting with different colors on the layer mask, I can either add to or delete any part of this that I want. So if I look at your fingertips, I'd be like, yeah, I kind of messed that up. So I'd take a small brush using painting with white to remove those areas that look a little funky. And I'm doing this with the mouse, which is not recommended. Painting stuff like this with a mouse is really, really difficult. But my tablet is sort of away from me right now, so I don't have access to that. But anyway, the idea here is it's just, it works just the same way. In the long run, it's maybe a little easier, but what it really has, the biggest benefit is that it has flexibility in being able to go back and adjust that mask any way we want to. So anyway, just a quick look at a different way to do that, because we are going to be doing some masking, a good bit of masking actually in this semester when we talk about compositing images and things like that. So this is just sort of a basic example of that. And you could have played with it again, you know, so we've got a color background. Oh, so this is the one variation you didn't have, a color background and a black and white foreground. You could also change the whole thing to black and white by just putting a black and white adjustment layer on top of that and getting it back to the way you had it. So a lot of different ways to do it. I just wanted to show you an alternate way for masking. All right, we're back out of that.
Whatever I did, it still had like that layer mask, but
did
I
it?
just, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, whatever you did, if you had a layer mask in there, you might have been able to go in and, you know, with some flexibility and paint areas back in. Just remember that when you're dealing with a
Okay.
layer mask, and you either paint with black or white, and depending on what you're masking, one color will add back in and the other color will take away. So I just have on my, you know, if I'm using the mouse, my fingers on my X key, because that reverses your black and white colors. And then, you know, with
Okay.
the mouse, I'm on the other one. And if I'm using the tablet, it's a little bit easier for me because I've got it set up so that if I paint with the point of the pen, it's one color, and if I turn it over and use the eraser, it's another color. So it just depends on the options that you set up. But yeah, if you had a layer mask in there, you probably, you know, can go back in and do a little bit of that. Just depends on what you masked out and how you did it.
Okay.
All right, let me get back to Bridge here. So, oh, and we did not, I need to create a folder here real quickly. And let me put those first two images in there that we looked at already. Oh, Haley, I didn't notice that yours was a PSD. I'm wondering what is still showing there. Let's see. Okay, so you have, oh, okay, so this is interesting. I'm going to go back and share this with you guys. I'm going to try. Yeah. So you did send a PSD rather than a flattened JPEG, and you'd have your background copy and you have your background underneath. So if I turn the background copy off, this is what your original image was, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so we can kind of get a good look at that. And so, yeah, we've got a transparent background. All right, so yeah, sometimes, even though it takes longer to upload a PSD file, sometimes it gives me a little bit of insight into, you know, what was done and how. And with the fact that we only had really a single image that you had to upload this week, you can get by with that. If I ask you to upload 10 images, don't send raw files or PSDs because you'll be there all night trying to get them to upload. But in this case, it kind of worked out. All right, let me get back to Bridge. All right, and so we did Alana's. Eva, you're up next. So we've got stained glass, a couple of stained glass windows. So again, I'm not sure the step and repeat that's in the middle, is that from the stained glass, a black and white copy of that, or is it a different image altogether?
That was a different image altogether.
And the two panes of stained glass, are they the same pane, or is it just, you know, the same pane repeated, or is it just two
Yeah,
pieces?
there's like 3 or 4 of them. And
Gotcha.
so I just substituted some of the stained glass for the,
So we've got, just looking to see if I get the whole image here. So you've got your step and repeat in between the two panes of stained glass, and then you've got it repeated again on the right, and it's converted to black and white. I guess the only, these by their very nature can be confusing images because of the fact that we've got a lot going on. And this one confuses me even a little bit more because there is so much going on between the mix of color and black and white, all of the detail that's in those pieces of stained glass, and then all of the step and repeat. So it's kind of it's kind of a lot going on visually. It's like a therapist would show you this and say, what do you see? I would see confusion, but that's pretty much what I see through most of my life is confusion. I guess that would be my only critique, is that overall, I think the image is a little bit busy, like to the point where I'm struggling to find, so the normal step and repeat that we did last week, it creates a swirl that our eye will naturally follow. Okay, it'll take us around to the center of that swirl or whatever. And in this case, like my eye doesn't really have any place to go. It keeps bouncing around through all the different shapes and geometry that are here, but I don't really have a clear path through the image. And it's, again, this is all very subjective because we're critiquing stuff that is not exactly what I would call, photography. I mean, it is, but it's more art than it is photography at this point. So I can't really, say anything too negative about it because it is what it is. But I guess that's my only comment, is that when I look at it, I get a little, I'm like, what do I got here in front of me? But again, it's such a subjective thing that I can't criticize it at all. I would like to have seen the stained glass, I think, a little sharper than it is. Maybe that's part of my issue, is that the stained glass is a little bit soft, and then the step and repeat is very sharp. So between those two, I'm like trying, because what happens is that the softness sort of recedes into the background and the sharpness protrudes. So I don't know. I just have a little problem with my brain, and maybe somebody else would look at it and go, "Oh, that's cool." They get it right away, and my brain is just left kind of floundering. All right, so I said a whole lot there without really saying a lot of anything. Sorry about that. But anyway, you did what I asked you to, which was, create a step and repeat, make it part of another image. All right, so Taylor, you're up next. Now, this is an interesting one. So a couple things are happening here. One is that our swirl is off center, and that may have been a function of the image that you used, and it may have been something you did intentionally by moving your first transformation a little bit off center. I'm not sure which way you did it, but I like the fact that we have this swirl that leads us not to the center of the image, but over to closer to an impact point. And then the other thing, and this is what I really want you to explain what you did and how, is that we have part of, I don't know if it's a different image or part of the same image that you used for the swirl, kind of coming through and almost growing out of the center of this, which is cool. I like that. So tell me what you did here.
Thank you. There are two separate images, and what I did was I used Snapseed to double expose them. So that's like my favorite thing right now, is like overlapping images, and I wasn't sure how to do it through Photoshop, so I just used Snapseed on my phone. But those little like pearl things, those are like these little things that were growing out of moss. And I know that like swirls, they're in nature like all the time. So I thought that would just look cool with those two together. It looked like it was, like you said, growing out of it.
Yeah, the only, so I like all of that. I like, because as soon as I looked at it, my first thought was, okay, so we have two images combined here. I didn't know if it was just a variation of the first image or not. But I like the fact that, oh, excuse me, sorry. These 5 o'clock mornings kind of get to me sometimes. Anyway, yeah, it's a little bit more ethereal looking with them kind of growing out, and they blended pretty well together. The only distraction, there is one distraction that I see that, well, two if you want to be really picky, that I'm not as fond of. Like I would like to see this without it, but anybody know what that is, or they are?
Is it like that hair in the bottom left?
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's like the sharpest thing in the image, and it doesn't really flow with the rest of the image. It kind of goes against the grain. And there's also a little piece of up here with this green piece, but it's out of focus the way the center of the image is. So that one doesn't bother me as much. It kind of looks like it's a little offshoot from that. But yeah, that one, is that what that is? A hair?
I think so. I was looking at it and I'm like, I don't think that's supposed to be there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it got there. And maybe it was part of the one image that just didn't get masked out. I don't know. But that's my only criticism about this is that that's a bit of a distraction to me. The rest of it, if I ignore that and don't look at that, again, I like the fact that we have this off-center swirl and we have this other image kind of growing out of it. You say these are growing out, you say they were growing out of moths. Is that what you said?
Moss. I
Oh,
have like,
moss. I thought you said
yeah,
moths. Which
moss.
isn't totally outside of the realm of possibility. I was just actually watching a show. I don't know. It was on Discovery Channel, I think. It's called Our Planet. It was narrated by David Attenborough, and there's a scene in there in one of the episodes where these everything from ants to caterpillars to any insect on this jungle floor gets infected with these spores and they die, and all of this fungus shoots out of their bodies, like comes out of their heads and everything. It's kind of gross, actually.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But it is really cool too. And that's when you said moths, I thought, is this what we're looking at here? It's something like that. But okay, moss, that makes a whole lot more sense.
That was like such a graphic scene when like the ant was like,
Oh, you saw that?
yeah, he was like trying to grab onto something,
Yeah.
and so he could like, I don't know, like all of a sudden like just this fungus like exploded out of his head, and
Yeah, I had to think to myself, what the heck that had to feel like. Like that's got to be talk about a horrible way to go, man. That had to be bad. And then they showed all these other insects that had died the same way, grasshoppers and caterpillars and stuff. That show, by the way, I don't know how much of it you've seen, but that show's amazing. The cinematography in that, there are some, if you watch the whole series, there are, I think, 2 or 3 behind the scenes shows that show how they filmed a lot of that. And oh my God, it's just so incredibly difficult in the conditions that they were under. And I think it took 2 years to get all the filming, and how many countless, thousands and thousands of hours of footage that they shot to get it. But wow, just every scene there was like I'd like to have a poster of it. The lighting was gorgeous. Everything about it was just perfect. So if you haven't seen it, guys, if you get a chance, it's called Our Planet. I think it's on Netflix, narrated by David Attenborough. Great series. It's only like 6 or 7 episodes. They do frozen worlds, they do jungles, a bunch of other stuff, but really cool. So anyway, getting back to where I was headed with this, you said that you combined 2 images using Snapseed because you weren't sure how to do it in Photoshop. It's actually really easy in Photoshop, because all you do is just, you can either drag one image on top of another, or you can do a copy and paste. But anyway, either way, as long as it creates, like, each image is on a separate layer, then you can just take a layer mask and paint away what you don't want to keep and leave what you do. And it's or you can just use a blending mode. I don't know if I have anything here that I can show you. Let me take a look quickly in this folder. All right, so this is something that we're going to get to, not today, but eventually. So let me just open these 2 images up, and I'll quickly show you what I'm talking about. I gotta share those in Photoshop. And again, I hope that it tells me I can share 2 screens. It says it's going to, but did it actually? Do we see both images here?
yeah.
Okay, so first of all, there's been some work done to this image of this gladiator already, because of the fact that he's been knocked out and he's on a neutral gray background. That makes it a lot easier. If he weren't, I would have to mask him out, like I showed you with Alana's image where I did the quick select tool. But the fact that he's on a gray background already actually makes it pretty easy. But if I just take him and drag him onto the other document, and then I'm going to size it down because it's obviously way too big. Let's just make him, kind of make him a little bit imposing here. So again, I can use a layer mask, and I'm going to show you that technique in a second. But with this, it's actually really easy because of the gray. So I could use what's called blending modes to make him blend in. So if you look in the layers palette, I've got my background layer, I've got the gladiator on top, and he's all gray. And there's this little drop down menu here. These are the blending modes. And you see as I scroll through them, it's doing exactly that. It's blending those two images. And I know from experience that overlay ignores gray. So if I select overlay, it pretty much did all the work for me. I've already got him knocked out. If he's not dark enough, I can just duplicate the background, or I'm sorry, duplicate his layer and make him a little bit more opaque. Now, let me get my tablet turned on here. Oh, the battery's dead. All right, let me plug it in.
I can't really see like where your mouse is or like your options or like the buttons that you're clicking on, but
Okay, let me move. Maybe it might be a resolution thing. Can you see the
yeah.
this window? Okay, so that's what I'm looking at right here. So I've got my background, I've got the first layer of him, and then I duplicated it, and they are set. The blending mode is this little pop-up menu that normally says normal. Okay, that's what it normally comes in at. And I'm just going through these, and there's a keyboard shortcut that'll walk you through these as well. There's some pretty cool ones in here. It does a completely different thing based on the images that you have. But in this case, I think overlay works really well. And then you also have the opacity that you can play with up here. Now, what I like is that it's pretty much done a lot of the work for me. What I don't like is that I see things through him that I don't really want to see. And maybe there's some areas of him that I don't really need. So if I go to my background layer, like if you look in his cape area here, you can see sort of the background showing through. Probably the easiest way to get rid of that, I'll need to put something behind this background layer. But if I put a layer mask on that background layer, and then take a black paintbrush, and we'll just do it at like 50% opacity and paint on that. So what I'm doing, see, I can paint right on him and it's not doing anything because the mask is on the background. I'm actually taking the background away and not him.
Okay.
So I could blend him in a little bit like that. Now, if I want, I'm just going to actually combine both versions of him into a layer group so I can make this a little easier. I can put a layer mask on that. If I only had one layer, I would just put the layer mask on one of those layers. But the fact that I've got two, I'll put the mask on the group that I created, and now it's going to affect both of those layers. So again, I'll take like a 25% paintbrush and maybe just paint starting on his feet. And you see how I can blend his feet in so that it looks like he's just sort of, starting to appear there. And we went a little too far on that spot. Paint that back in. Maybe I'll take a little bit of his sword out, let a little bit more of that background show through. But anyway, this is kind of the beauty of layer masks, is that you can really play with these things. I should have black to do this, yeah. And depending on the opacity of your brush and whether you're painting with black or white, you can get a great variety of techniques. Now, if I didn't, I'm going to go back all the way to the beginning here. I'm going to take this layer out, and I'm going to throw this one away so that I just have him, and I'm going to put him in normal mode. So let's say he was not on a gray background and I had to find some other way to make this work. I can, again, just use a paintbrush. If I put a layer mask on that layer, and it's just that third icon from the left, and then I'll just take 100% black paintbrush, I can just start painting that out. And if I go into him, I just reverse my colors and paint with white, and I paint him back in. So that's kind of a quick method of doing it. This one was easy because of the fact that he's already on a gray background, and I knew I had a blending mode that would work for that. So
Wow,
combining two images, just drag one on top of the other so that they're on separate layers, and then you have a lot of control with what you do. And then, of course, with the move tool, you can move it wherever you want. You can transform it to whatever size you want. All sorts of cool things you can do along those lines. So let me get out of here. And we'll get back to Bridge. So I don't want to get sidetracked, but at the same time, as we go through the semester, when I see an opportunity to touch on something that we might not get into in a lot of detail later on, I'm going to take it. So with your image, it very much would have worked the way we just showed. You could have drug the image of the little pearls that are coming out of the moss on top of your swirl, and then just taken a very soft paintbrush, maybe at 50% opacity, and just started painting out the things you didn't want to keep and leaving the things you did. And again, because of the fact that it's a mask, if you go too far, you just switch your colors and paint back the other way. So it's a real very flexible, very powerful way to do composites. We are going to get into some of that in one of the, probably not too far down the line, because we've kind of changed the batting order. Normally, the second class, we would be starting into some lighting, some hands-on complicated lighting, but I really want to save that for hopefully face-to-face, because I can do it remotely, but boy, it's tough. It's going to be so tough. And you're just going to be sort of watching me work a lot of times in the dark, because of the way some of this stuff has to be shot in the dark. And it's just a lot easier if we're all together to do that. I'm going to put some of that off as long as I can. But we're definitely going to get there. And if we have to do it remotely, we will. So for right now, the first few weeks, we're going to kind of do some little Photoshop techniques or things that I can do a little more easily this way. All right, so Chris is up next. So Chris has, we have two images here. So we'll look at the more, I guess, normal use of it here. We have this basketball shot that he did a spiral of. And so you did something on both of these, I think. Let me look at the other one real quickly. So that's your initial image. Good portrait, by the way. I do have a suggestion on this one, but overall it's really good. Love the lighting on it. Love the color contrast, the location you picked. Everything was really good on that. So it looks to me like I'm guessing that when you did your step and repeat, and I'm sure this was intentional, you just simply stopped it, or at least that's what the image on the left looks like. You just stopped it at a certain point rather than go all the way to infinity.
Yeah.
The one on the right looks a little different, because it looks like you went all the way to infinity and then took that image, and I don't know. I'm seeing part of the original image, but I'm seeing the swirl all the way down to their feet, which is kind of cool. How did you do that?
I don't know. I just kind of like watched the class that from last week, and I thought I had it right to like an extent, but after seeing everybody else's, I wished like I would have understood more, because I thought like, I don't know.
Well, you just did a little more literal version of it,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like what we did in class, but yet there are differences. The one on the left, like I said, is obvious. I think that you just stopped before going to infinity, and that's cool. I kind of like that, because it creates all these leading lines that force us into this tiny little portrait, which is, sometimes something that artists do a lot. They create something that's very small, but then they force you to look at it. I don't know if has anybody ever heard the story of how John Lennon met Yoko Ono? Does anybody know that story? So first of all, I'm not a Yoko fan. I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely person, but she's a little out there. And I think I lost a lot of respect when I heard her singing background tracks, or she put an album out actually. And it's like someone torturing a cat. Like it's really that bad. Um, but anyway, she had an art show in I believe it was in New York, and John Lennon walked into the art show to see what she had. He didn't know her, didn't know anything about her, and there was this huge ladder in the middle of the room, and it went up to this huge piece of canvas that was on the ceiling. And from the floor, all you could see on the canvas was just this little black dot in the middle of it. And the idea was you were supposed to climb the ladder to see what it was, like you couldn't see it from the floor. And so he climbs the ladder, and what was actually up there was the word yes. So I don't know what her original meaning was for that art piece, but he said later that if it had been no, if the word had been no, it would have turned him off and he would have left. But because it was yes, it intrigued him, and he wanted to meet the artist. And the rest is history. They ended up getting married and creating a lot of controversy along the way. But anyway, so the artists will use this a lot of times in creating a very small piece, but using some technique that forces your eye to go to it. So that one I can see, I can understand. The one on the right, I do see an outline of your original image, but yet I see the swirl all the way through. Like it's just kind of, I'm not sure, not sure how you did that.
I don't even really know. Like I don't know what you mean. I don't
Okay,
think it was
so
intentional
let me
here.
look.
Like I took it very literally.
I'm going to look at your original. So your original
Yeah.
is this. But you see how the outer edge, when we start at the bottom and we work our way in, I can see, all right,
The
I actually
original
see a
image.
pair of feet and a head of the
Yeah.
original image behind this other image of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think two of them. I think
Okay.
I stacked two of them on top of each other. I don't know if I did that intentionally or what.
Well, it made me take notice. I mean, it made me look at it and go, what the heck's going on here? Because again, there's no right or wrong. It kind of creates this little vignette of an image within an image. And I do kind of like that. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with this at all. I just think I find it interesting because I can't quite figure out exactly how you did it. But yeah, I don't know. I'd have to play with it to see if I could duplicate it. But it's an interesting look. I do like it. So the portrait image, I'm going to go back to this. And I'm going to open it in Photoshop because I don't know for sure, but I think I have something, an idea that I might want to try here. So let me share that Photoshop screen. So I'm going to do something to this image that I think might improve it a little bit. Anybody want to take a guess what it might be? I'm not going to draw a mustache on her, so that's not it. If you thought that.
Is it that weird like bar looking thing behind her shoulder?
Um, that's not it, but I mean, I look at that, I see it, but I see a couple of things in the background that kind of are along the lines of those tones. They don't really bother me because they're so far out of focus. If I really, really wanted to make this as perfect as possible, yeah, I probably would take at least that one out just because it does create a little contrast back there. But I think honestly, this thing is going to benefit a lot just from a little bit of cropping. And I'll tell you why. The reason is, let me take that off of there. When I look at the pine tree from the left, it takes up almost 50% of the image, and most of it is out of focus. So even though that helps me to get to the subject better, I just feel like there might be a little bit too much of it. So let me just see what happens. And it's probably, I don't want to come up like, I mean, I can. I don't know if I want to leave the elbow or not, but let me bring this in, maybe even make it a little more of a slim line. And just look, if I do that,
Yeah.
look at where the impact point is It's right directly over her eye. So I could go with that, or I could pull it down a little bit more. I'm just going to hit that and see what happens. And so let's compare the two versions. To me, this makes the subject pop a little bit more, makes her stand out a little bit more. This one is just a little bit tougher to get to her. And we didn't really lose anything that was of any importance. There's nothing in that tree that, you know, if there was a red bird in there, obviously I'd want to keep it, but there's nothing there that keeps us from doing that. And then on top of that, I'm going to throw one more thing on here, and it's going to look bad at the beginning, but let me quickly fix this. So what I just did was throw a vignette onto the top of it. And can you see what that did?
Yeah. Well,
It
I
just-
think the original, I put a vignette on the original one, but obviously you cropped it. So
Yeah, if
Right.
I go back to the original, let me do a snapshot of this so I can get back to
no,
it.
that does look really good though. I mean, it's not that prominent, but yeah, that looks better. You're right.
Yeah, I just think that if I'm looking at her, if I want to see her, a couple little things like that really make it stand out. But I really love the shot. I love the highlights in the eyes. Again, the lighting is incredibly soft. It is, this is what we call broad lighting rather than short lighting. So typically, for females, especially for most people in general, but for females especially, I prefer short lighting. And what short lighting is that the side of the face that is the smaller side, the side that is away from the camera, is what's lit, where the main light is coming from. And the side that is closer to the camera or is showing more of the face is a little more in shadow, because what it does is it slims the face down a little bit. But in this case, there's a couple of reasons not to do that. First of all, the lighting is really beautiful. It's really soft. The pose is good too. I love what you did with her hand. Very elegant look on the hand. But the way her hair is, if this was lit from the right side, there would have been way too much shadow, I think, on her face created by the way her hair comes down. So this was, you know, again, a really good example of a good use of broad lighting. But was this just all natural, just an overcast day?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you find light that good without having to supplement it in any way. But overall, that's a really, really good shot. Like that one a lot.
Thanks.
All right, back to bridge. And we've got one more. All right, so we have a gradient, we have an image, and we have a combination. Now, normally when you guys submit your assignments, there's no text included with them. There's just an image. This one has some text that was included that I got to tell you, I'm glad I read it at home alone and not in line at the grocery store, because I think I would have spit something out my nose. It made me laugh. And
You're
I'm going to read it.
welcome.
I'm going to read it for you guys. This is what Beth included with her image or images. It said, have you ever had a really cool concept in your head that you think, man, this is a really cool concept? So you try to create it and it really isn't going right. So you keep trying, and with every step in Photoshop, it's getting slightly worse, but you keep at it until you finally realize you have no idea what you're doing and it's almost 2 a.m. and you fall asleep at your computer. Waking up in the morning, you look at it some more and think, this really isn't getting any better and I should have tried something different. But man, it's due today and I have to submit this dumpster fire. That's the line that killed me. I love that. I hope Professor Campbell doesn't judo kick me for this. I don't know why he would. Does he even know Taekwondo? Probably. Anyways, lesson learned is to have multiple dumb ideas that might not work instead of one dumb idea that really didn't work. So I would have given you an A just on the dissertation. But I'm going to be honest with you, this is my favorite image that was submitted this week.
Really?
This is sort of exactly what I had in mind, was combining a couple of images, but doing it in a way that kind of makes you think a little bit and maybe even forces you to create a story. In my mind, what I see when I look at this image, and again, art is so subjective, and I guarantee you that this is not what you had in mind. But when I look at it, what my mind does is this is almost a social statement on um, on what has happened in this country over the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, I guess, where we've become a society of entertainment addicts. You know, we sit in front of a television, we sit in front of a video game, we sit in front of anything that entertains us without us doing anything. I love the fact that he's just sitting there. It is a he, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my brother.
Okay, that he's just sitting there, this bump on a log. He's not doing anything, and he's kind of mesmerized by this thing that almost looks like a TV test pattern. And that even furthers the story for me, that like we are so starved for entertainment that we'll watch anything. And I don't know, like I said, the execution of it was done really well. I really like that. I love the fact that even the color of your background is now reflected in the floor.
Yeah,
which
that took a
wasn't-
while.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. It's obviously, if you look at that, it's not there, but it is in this. And I do see you've got the PSD file. I did not open that to see what you have there. Oh, okay. So you've got your masked. Yeah, okay. I see what you did. And then the group. You guys can't see this because I'm in Photoshop. I'm just looking to see what she has here. Ooh, I do like one thing, I think, a little better. I am going to share this so you guys see this. So you've got this, your second layer from the bottom has reduced the contrast in that background a little bit. And if I turn that off, I kind of like that, where I've got this really
I was
stark.
torn between those two. I was really
Yeah,
torn between those two.
I think the contrast in that one I really like. Again, I'm not knocking the image overall because I think it's fantastic. But I think I do like it a little bit better with the additional contrast. But yeah, pretty cool. Pretty much exactly what I was looking for in the exercise. You guys all did it. You all carried it a little bit of a step further than what we did in class last week. But as soon as I saw this one, I think graphically, because it's so stark and it's reduced things to just a few elements. I love the fact that you can still see the doorway, but just a little bit. There's not a lot of detail there, but there's enough highlight on it that you can see what's there. I mean, yeah, I'm blown away by this one. This
Oh,
this
thanks.
one
I
is
thought it
really
was
cool.
terrible.
No, not at all. Let me.
It's mostly like the cropping of like the doorway of like how I removed like our living room. It just looks bad on the edges.
Well, again, I'm not going to get hung up on details that are not that prominent. Like you don't really see, that's not what your eye goes to at all here. If I get into it really closely and look at it up tight, yeah, I'm going to see some of that. But overall, I just can't knock it at all. I even like a couple little subtle things, like the lower left-hand corner of your design, the way it's got this little bend at the bottom. It almost looks like this is projected onto a piece of white cloth or something that's hanging there, and it's a little bit too long for where it, I don't know. There's just a lot of little things here that I think are pretty cool. So let me go back here. Chris, between these two images, do you have a favorite? I like the one on the right because I can't quite figure it out, but I like the one on the left because I love the image.
I guess go with the one on the right.
Okay, we'll take that. I just want to put all these together. I don't know if I did already. Don't think I did. And Alana, I think you said you liked the color one, and did I put that in there? No. All right, so these are our submissions for the week. I'm going to tell you right now that I'm already awarding a point to Beth. Because I know I've kind of jaded your opinions already by talking it up so much. So now, if you didn't vote for it, you'd kind of feel bad. So I'm taking that off the table. I'm telling her she's already getting a point for that image. So what we're going to
Thank
do,
you.
you're welcome. It was just a great job. We're going to look at the other ones and have you guys vote and pick the best one of all of those. So I can see you. Let me get the screen a little bigger here. There we go. So we're just going to do a show of hands. Again, you can vote for your own image, but you can only vote once unless there's a tie. So we're going to do a show of hands on Chris's spiral on the first one. Let me see hands for that one. Okay, let's do Eva's. Okay, then let's do Haley's. And then the Taylor's, that is your, yeah, Taylor swirl. Okay. Then the eyes. And finally, the mirror shot. There's our winner. There's our second winner right there. So let me get both of these marked. So good job to both Alana and Beth this week. They were, and again, there's something about, there is something about every one of these that I really like. I like the way that you took it to another level. So good job on the assignment, especially when we only have 6 or 7 people. You might think it's easier to stand out, but the truth is that because we don't have a lot of variety, it's actually sometimes a little harder to stand out. And you guys did a good job this week. All right, so stop sharing that. It is about 5 after 5, 6 after 5. We're gonna when we come back, we're gonna take a little break, but when we come back, we're going to look at 2 different uses for a particular tool. Has anybody had any experience using Liquify? No? So we're going to play with it. We're going to look first at an artistic use of it, and then we're going to look at a more practical use of it. And your assignment for next week will be to pick one or the other, whether it's the artistic or the practical, and create an image using that. But we'll show you 2 different ways to do it. Again, the first part of this, where actually when we come back, you're really going to be sort of watching. However, if you have an image, normally what I would do in class, I would send these images that I'm going to show you around on a thumb drive, and you guys could work along with me. Obviously, we don't have access to that. I didn't put them in Dropbox or anything. So you're just going to kind of watch, but if you do want to try along with me with another image, that's fine. But when we come back, we'll walk through those 2 exercises and then go from there. So now it's 5:07. Let's say 5:15. We'll come back and finish up. How's that sound? All right, we'll see you in a bit. Oh, I missed my own deadline. Give me just 1 second, guys. I did not, I missed a phone call. Had my phone turned off and I had an email that I needed to respond to. Sorry about that. I don't know if I told you or not, a few weeks ago, I was sitting in traffic in Bridgeport and waiting for somebody in front of me to turn left, and I got creamed from behind, did $3,000 worth of damage to the back of my van, and the person took off. So I have no idea who it was. Nobody got a license number. And so I'm going to miss a week's worth of work because it's going to take at least 5 days to repair once they get all the parts in. And anyway, that was my insurance agent telling me how we had a problem with the check. They sent me a check, and I don't know what they're thinking. They sent me a check it's made out to me and to the bank that has the loan. And that particular bank does not have a branch within 100 miles of here. And so in order to deposit it, I need to get them to endorse it. And there's just no way to do that. So she has to reissue the check. Anyway, enough of my personal problems. All right, so we're going to get into, like I promised you, we're going to look at a creative technique, first of all, for Liquify. So this technique was born from a very popular, it's actually still popular. There are people creating artwork this way using an old Polaroid SX70 film camera. If you remember those cameras or remember seeing them, they looked like this. And you would take the picture and the print would actually spit out the front of the camera, and it would take a couple of minutes. It was like watching a print in a tray in a darkroom, because it would take a couple of minutes for the image to form on the surface of that print. So it was an instant camera, but it took a couple of minutes. And while that print was curing, the surface, the emulsion of it was very gelatinous, and it was easy to manipulate. And so what people would do, and I don't know if I have an image of it here, I don't think I do. They would take that print, which was only, this big, it was about that size, and they would take some kind of a stylus, like a sharpened tool, a dental tool, or a golf tee or something like that. And you could actually push the emulsion around, like you could do all sorts of cool things to it. So this is sort of an example of what an SX70 manipulated print would look like. If you pushed really hard, you would actually go through the emulsion and it would show the paper on the back. So if you look in the sky area, for example, those aren't clouds probably up there. That's probably, you're actually looking at the paper where they push the emulsion away from it. So there's a couple of examples of it. That's sort of one of the more, and these things were huge, guys. People were doing these things and then photographing them to make copies so they can make large prints, and selling these like for huge amounts of money to like banks and things like that to put on their walls. And they're still doing it. You can still make money doing these techniques because they're not things that a lot of people have seen. Here's kind of a little more unusual take on it. This is a little more normal. And again, you can really see all those little highlights in there are from the emulsion being pushed completely aside and showing the paper beneath. But you can move the image around, and sometimes people did some funky things with it. If you played with people, obviously there's phone filters now that'll do all of this stuff. But this was a really manual method, and it had a lot of flexibility and a lot of control, and it was huge. Like I said, a lot of people made a lot of money doing this. So we're going to look at how this is done digitally. I wanted to figure this out a number of years ago when I was teaching a class out of state, and it was 2 photographers, and they kind of wanted to know how to do this. So I sat down, and it took me a day or so to figure out all of the details. But I'm going to show you that now. So we're going to go to this folder, and I've got 2 images here. I think I'm going to do this one. I normally do the other one. I haven't done this in a long time, so I'm going to do this one instead. Let me get that open, and I will share that. You can kind of watch what I'm doing here. Okay. So let me first of all, hopefully it's going to let me zoom in. It did. So the first thing I want to do is create a copy of this background. So I'll just hit Command J or Control J on Windows to make a copy of it. And then it's a really simple technique to start. I'm just going to take that copy. I'm going to go to the filter menu and come down to liquify, which, by the way, I never do. If you know me at all, you know that I don't like going into menus. I usually have shortcuts for all of this stuff, but I'm showing you the long way so you know how it's done. So I'm going to use my tablet for this, if I can pull the cord far enough to show you. This is my Wacom tablet. If you have a tablet, this is definitely the way to do any kind of painting in Photoshop, anything at all, because trying to do it with a mouse, I've always said, is like trying to paint the Mona Lisa with a bar of soap. It just isn't intuitive. This with the pen gives me the feeling of actually painting or using a brush. So what I'm going to do is take a brush. I'm going to create a brush. Now liquify, I don't know again how much you can see, but on the left hand side we've got all of our tools, and there aren't a lot of tools in here. The forward warp tool, which is the most used, is the one we're going to use for this exercise. But I'll just run down the list and show you what we've got. We've got a reconstruct tool. So for example, if I take the forward warp and I do this across my image and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that, I just take the reconstruct tool and I can paint it back to the way it was. So I don't have to leave this dialogue in order to do this. I'm going to resize one of my windows here so I can see all of you. Okay, so then below that, we've got the smooth tool, which I don't ever use. We've got the twist clockwise tool, which is kind of a funky one. If I can get a big brush here and just kind of click and show you what it does. If I hold it down, it just creates this, clockwise twist. And of course, I don't want that. So we're going to reset all of that. All right, the reset button is not working, so we'll use reconstruct. Then there is a pucker tool, which we'll use in a little bit, and a bloat tool, which is the reverse of the pucker tool. We'll show you how that works in a little bit. Push left, freeze. The freeze tool is an interesting one. So let's say, for example, I wanted to do what I'm going to do to this image, but I did not want the flags affected. I could paint those with this freeze tool, and now they're red. And so if I take this forward warp, I can go all the way around, but it leaves the flags alone. So that's what, and then the thaw tool, which is below that, is I can either paint that away or just refine what I've painted. So it's just the reverse of the freeze. And then there's some facial tools down below that, which we're going to use on another image. So to do this, to do what I want to do, all I'm going to do is take this forward warp tool and I'm going to push in small movements my image around. I'm just going to take all of these lines that are vertical and I'm going to go back and forth, up and down, left and right, just the way I would do if I were doing this image, let's say with a golf tee or something like that. And an image like this that has all of these vertical and horizontal lines works really well. I can change the size of my brush if I want to make this a little more pronounced or get it a little faster. In these background areas, I'd probably want a little smaller brush just to have a little more control. But you can see it doesn't take long. It's not going to, you be careful when you get near the edge. If you pull in from the edge, you see this little transparent area. You don't want that. You want to make sure your image goes all the way to the end. So we're just going to play around with all the lines. I am going to move the flags. I'm going to let them morph and warp a little bit as well. So again, there are apps and all sorts of things out there that will emulate this, but none of them give you the kind of control that doing it with just an actual pen or even a mouse. If you have to use the mouse, you can do that. So my sign, I'm going to move. I'm not going to mess that much with the words because I still want to be able to read what I have here, but I am going to move them a little bit. I just kind of want it to look like a little more Salvador Dali ish, if that's a word. Just a few more things that need to be tweaked. And that's pretty much, I might do a little bit in the concrete in the bottom. You're not going to see it as much because it's a little more of a monochromatic area. All right. And that's probably about where I would stop with that. I'll hit OK and come out. And you can see if I turn that layer off, you see my original image and then what I did to it. And then because of the fact that the emulsion would normally be showing through from time to time, depending on how hard I push, that was the part that was hard to figure out. I wanted to create some highlights based on what I just did. So I'm going to duplicate that layer again. And this time, and I haven't done this in a while, so I'm not sure where the filter is anymore. I'm looking for a filter called Plastic Wrap, and I believe it's probably in the filter gallery. So if you haven't looked at the filter gallery, it's under the filter menu, obviously. You've got all kinds of things in here. You can see it already kind of did some weird things. And you can just click on the different, that's charcoal, that's chalk and charcoal. This is chrome, graphic pen. It's got all of these little pre-designed things in there that you can apply. But what I'm looking for, there it is. It's called Plastic Wrap. And depending on how I move the sliders, you can see I'm creating a little bit of a different look. I want it to be a little smoother, but a little more detail. And that looks about right. I'm going to hit OK. And then again, if I turn that layer on and off, you can see the effect that it's created. If I think it's a little too strong, no problem. I can just back the opacity of that layer down a little bit. Let's take it down to about 75%. And that's all there is to it, going from here to here. So these little snapshots, it's amazing that if I were, this is a little beach town in North Carolina, I could do this. I guarantee you I could walk into this place and sell them an image for their wall without them even batting an eye. These things almost sell themselves because they're so artistic and so impressionistic, and they're really, really easy to do. Like I said, it's nothing more than moving, using the forward warp tool in Liquify to move things around, then use the Plastic Wrap filter on a duplicate of that to give you some highlights, and you're good to go. So that's the artistic version. That's a really easy way to create something that's interesting like this. Now I'm going to close this up, and we're going to take a look at the more practical uses. Not that that's impractical, but some things that are probably used a little bit more, the tools used a little bit more for. So let me get another image open. And I'll share this screen. All right, so this is just a studio portrait of a real estate agent. This is very old. All of these shots that I'm using are very old. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, all that kind of stuff. So does anybody have an idea for what I might use the tool for on this image? What do you see that might require a little correction? Or maybe not so much correction, but just would make him happier with the image. So I forget this guy's name, but he has a problem that I have as well. He likes his carbs. I am a breadaholic, and it looks like he might be too. And so we've got this little expansion going on in his midsection, and especially because of the angle that he's photographed at, where he's turned a little more to the side, it becomes a little more pronounced. So I'm going to duplicate this layer as well. Well, I'm going to try. My keyboard, for some weird reason, is not functioning. And I don't know if I have a battery issue or what's going on here. Now I have the spinning beach ball of death. Let's see what happens. I'll probably end up with 4 copies of this background layer. Yep. All right, so I get rid of one of them. All right, so that's the layer that I'm going to work on. On a normal image, like if it's a very high resolution image and I'm only going to work on a very small part of it, I would actually take the lasso tool and just, make a selection around the area that I want to work on and put that on a new layer, because the fewer pixels you have on a layer, the smaller your overall file size. And the smaller your file size, the faster Photoshop works. Now, Liquify used to be a really time-intensive tool. It used to be really slow. Like you would sometimes make a move and then sit and wait for the beach ball to stop spinning, and then it would happen. Not so anymore. They've really upgraded it, and it works pretty much real time now. So I'll just, on that background layer, I'm going to go back to Liquify from the filter menu. And this time, instead of the forward warp tool, I'm going to take the pucker tool. Now, what the pucker tool does is it draws pixels to the center of the brush. Wherever I put that crosshair, it's going to draw pixels from all around it in towards the center. And it's kind of like magic. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger than the area I want to affect. And watch what happens when I click on his waistline. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? Like just a few simple mouse clicks, and then I can take the forward warp tool and correct a few little things, like maybe this part of his belt would be pushed up a little bit, maybe a couple little areas on his shirt need to be straightened up, and I can take a bigger brush and even move up a little bit more if I feel that it needs a little bit more. So that's pretty quick. Let me turn the preview on and off, and you can see the before and after. Now, there are some things you need to watch out for. So do you see this line in the background, this Trico background is coming down? When I turn the preview on and off, can you see how it changed the angle of that? So there's 2 ways to fix that. And also his arm is a little bit funky now too. So the easiest way to do it probably would have been, let's hit reconstruct here. Well, that didn't reconstruct. It's not working the way it's supposed to. Probably the best way, the quickest way to do it would have been to freeze those areas using the freeze tool. So I could have painted, you know, I would have gone in probably at a pretty high magnification and just painted his arm and that area of the background that I know is probably going to be affected here. And with the thaw tool, I'll take off a little bit of overspray. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a keyboard shortcut. Oh, yes, there is. F is for the freeze tool and D is for the thaw tool. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, now with that frozen, if I take that pucker tool again and pull him in, and we'll just do that part of it. Oh, I didn't paint his arm, sorry. No, I did paint the arm. Oh, but it is going to pull in a little bit of that. All right, so I'll hit OK and we'll come out and take a look. So it did a decent job. It did freeze the things I wanted to be frozen, but it did also stretch. You can see here the pixels at the edge of his arm, it kind of pulled those in. So in this case, it does require a little bit of extra work. I would just probably create a blank layer and take a rubber stamp, you know, the clone tool, and just clone the pixels from his arm into that area so that if anybody looks at it close up, they're not going to see, you know, that telltale look of it being pulled over. So that's one image, and we'll close that up. Of course, every time I do that, I have to reshare. Let me get back into, get another image open here. All right, that's not what I wanted to share. Oh, there, okay. Couldn't find the button to close that window. All right, so this image we're going to work on as well. So kind of some similar things here, but things that are a little bit different too. So the thing that bothers me a little bit about this image, there's a couple of things. Her sweater, for example, down here on the lower part of her sweater, and why it does not want to, there we go, increase. So this little area right here that's kind of gapping, and even this area up here that's a little bit gapping, they kind of bother me a little bit. So I'm going to do kind of a similar thing with those. We'll go to Filter, Liquify. And I'm just going to take the forward warp tool, the normal forward warp, and I'm going to take, you know, the size of the brush is what's important here. I'm going to make the brush a little smaller, and I'm just going to pull those edges in. Now I have to be careful because of my background. Like I can't go this way because I'll see that in the background. I have to follow the lines that are in my background already. And then I'll come down on this part, take a little smaller brush. And you can see I messed up the string, so I have to go back and move that. And then maybe even just pull in a little bit from here. On the back side, you know, I can tuck in a little bit here. And then her shirt as well, it's got this little area that kind of pops up. Maybe I'll push that down and pull this part up so that it makes the shirt a little more even. And so the before and after, you can see it just real quickly makes this whole thing a little more saleable, a little more palatable than it was before. Now I can do something with this image, but I want to see if I have another image that might be better. Yeah, I'm going to use a different image. So I'm going to close this up. We'll cancel that because I was able to preview it. We don't need to save that. And let me get my last image open here. Sorry, I got a lot of windows open here and it's tough going back and forth. Okay, so again, I'll duplicate the background if it'll let me. Maybe I'll just drag it down. There we go. There's the keyboard shortcut is Command or Control J, but you can also drag down to the plus sign, which is a new layer, and it'll duplicate your layer that way. For some reason, my keyboard is just giving me fits today. So we'll take that into Liquify, and we're going to use a tool that we haven't looked at yet in here, which is the facial tool. So when I click on that, you see that it automatically recognizes the face. If I have multiple faces in an image, it'll recognize all of the faces in the image, and just by which one I click on is the one that it's going to work on at any given time. Now this one, there's only one face, so it's already highlighted. So the first thing I would do on an image like this is go into the shape, the face shape, which is on the lower right-hand side. And I'm going to pull in the width of the face, and I'm going to pull in the jawline a little bit. Now I'm going to just stop right there and do the preview back and forth. Can you see what it just did there? I literally probably took about 15 or 20 pounds off of her. There are some things that you can, sometimes you need to do to compensate for what it's done. So the chin height, I can adjust smaller or larger. In this case, I'm not really going to mess with that too much. The forehead, I can give her more bangs or less bangs. It's more bang for your buck. Again, I'm not going to mess with that too much on this image either. But I want to run through and show you some of the other options that are in here. Let me scroll down so you can see this. So under the, of course, there's some options at the top for the size of your brush, the density. If you are using a stylus on a tablet like I am, you can turn this on and it will work basically by how hard you press. The harder you press, the more pronounced the effect will be. At this point, I'm not using any of that. If there's more than one face, they show up in the drop downs here, so you can select them there rather than clicking on them in the image. But you've got all of these options. So eyes, let's look at, you can control each eye individually. If I think her eyes are a little too small, I can drag that slider and move her eyes and make them a little bigger. So you never see somebody who has one eye that's maybe a little smaller than the other or looks a little more closed than the other. And sometimes it's due to the camera angle, like whichever eye is closer to the camera will typically look larger, and the eye that's further away will look a little smaller. So if their head is turned a good ways, sometimes I'll increase the size of that back eye. We can increase or decrease the height of the eye from the center, left and right. And I think that eye probably needs a little bit. The other eye didn't really. Change the width of the eye. And maybe we'll just give her a touch on both of those. And we can preview it on and off to see. So she has very, very tiny eyes. So you have to be careful not to go too far. I'm actually going a little further than I normally would, just so you can see the effect here. You can even change the distance between her eyes. So if her eyes are set too close together, we can actually pull them a little further apart. Let's look at that. And again, that's sometimes a compensation tool for the other adjustments. You can also take the forward warp tool while you're in here and just make some minute adjustments. Like if I look at this little part of her eyelid, which needs a little boost up, I can just take that little forward warp with a small tool and do that. All right, let me back out. Then we can go to the nose, the height of the nose, how high or low on the face it sits, how wide the nose is. If somebody has an overly wide nose, you can decrease its size a little bit. And then we're making a lot of changes. I would never do this many changes to anybody's face. Unless they really, I mean, I've never had anybody that needed that much work, but typically it's a little bit of an eye open or maybe, you know, a little crooked smile or something like that. Sometimes they don't smile at all and you can fix that, which is right here. So I can make her smile less or I can make her smile more. kind of make her look like the Joker. A little bit of an increase sometimes isn't too bad. The lips, the upper lip and lower lip. Some people she has a very thin upper lip, so I can Botox her a little bit, give that upper lip a little punch. Do the same to the lower lip, maybe give it more, or in this case, maybe a little less so that it matches that upper lip. We can look at the width of her mouth, which again, I don't think I want to mess with here, or the height. So if we wanted to close the mouth, because she does have a little bit of an open mouth, so we can close that up a little bit. So let's just look at the before and after with the preview turned on and off. Let me actually zoom it out just a little bit. Sometimes that helps. So there's a lot of changes there. Typically, all I'm really going to do with her is probably pull the shape of the face in a little bit. I do kind of like what it did to the mouth a little. I think the eyes are a little overdone. So let's just reconstruct that part. Oh, no, actually, you can't reconstruct that. You have to reset. But for whatever reason, the reset button is not working. So I guess we'll just reset these eyes all to 0. All right, so now we haven't changed the eyes. We've just changed, well, we did change the distance of the eye. All right. So now it's just basically the shape of the face. And honestly, this is not something that she'll probably notice that was done. Like, people don't recognize these types of things in themselves. But so I don't tell them. I don't ever, make a point of what I've done. I just do it. If it needs it, I'll pull it in a little bit. But she'll like that a whole lot better than she would like that. There are some other things that we can do here, even like in the neck area. Again, I can take that forward warp, take a pretty good sized brush, and just pull that in a little bit to match what we did to the face. Pull the shoulders down. You can, change the shape of the shoulders a little bit. There's all sorts of little things. The key is here that you want to be a little judicious. You don't want to overdo it because you don't want somebody looking like it's not them. However, we did say that there were a couple tools in here we didn't look at. So we looked at the pucker tool. We didn't look at the bloat tool. So bloat is obviously the opposite of pucker. And yes, obviously there are tons of phone apps that do this same thing, but none of them give you the kind of control that this does. If this girl ever knew what I was doing to her, she would probably sue me. So you can have some fun in here. I'll say this is sort of like when you first start playing with Photoshop. I think the first thing everybody does is clone a third eye into the middle of somebody's forehead. Do it, get it over with, be done with it, and move on. This is kind of the same thing. You're going to come in here, you're going to play around with a couple of images, you'll have some fun, but this isn't really what it's for. Have some fun, move on. All right, I'm going to cancel that. We're not going to keep that. And I think that's probably the last image in there that I wanted to look at. Let me double check. Yes, it is. All right, let me get rid of my tablet. So for next week, the assignment is to liquefy something, someone, somehow. And you can use either the artistic version that we looked at, and feel free to expand on it. If there's something that you feel that you can add to it other than what we did, feel free to do that. Or you can use it to do something a little more practical like we did with the portrait stuff. Or do one of each, whatever you want, whatever you have time for. The good thing is that you can go out and photograph something new for this if you want, or you can take an existing picture that you already have, save yourself a little bit of time and do it that way. Either way is acceptable. It would be kind of cool if you did both. It would kind of show me that you've understood all of the workings of that tool, but I'll accept one because I know, schedules are a little crazy with you guys too. So, but if you have time to do two, that would be great. The other thing I'll mention to you is, and I'll try to put this, I'll try to remember to put this in the announcement for the assignment, but especially when there are multiple images that you're going to upload, put those images into a folder first, name the folder with your name, and then compress them into a zip file. If you're going to send 3 or 4 files and you don't do that, then I have to download each one individually, and it takes a little bit longer. So if you just compress them into a zip, even if you're doing one file, you can still do that. It'll save you some space and upload a little bit faster. But I'll try to remember to put that in to the announcement thingy. So it's just going on 6. We're about a half an hour early, but that's okay. Again, this class in particular, I'm really more about the content. I'm more about getting the subject matter covered than I am too concerned about the time we spend doing it. If we can cover it in a little bit less time, then great. And there may be times where it'll take us a few minutes longer, but I won't go, if I ever go long, it won't be that long. And I would rather do that rather than introduce a new topic. You know, I could easily start on something new now, and all that does is confuse everybody. So let's concentrate on Liquify for this week. Play with that, have some fun with it, come up with an image or two, send that in, and we'll see who does the best job next week. Any questions on any of the, again, this is being recorded. It takes forever to get these things rendered. Like I'll have the video itself rendered in like an hour or 2 here. But then when I upload to YouTube, which I prefer using YouTube because Topper Station has some space issues and you have to kind of jump through hoops to get stuff posted there. Like I can't do it directly. So I just use my YouTube channel and do that. But it takes a while. It doesn't take long to upload the file, but for whatever reason, once you've uploaded the file, it takes like an entire day for YouTube to process both the standard and the high definition version. So it might be tomorrow, it might be Saturday, you know, or it might be Sunday before I even remember to go back in and send you guys a link. If you are playing with this and you can't remember something, you can either email me or text me, or just send me a note and say, hey, is the video ready yet? I want to go back and review it or whatever. And I'll be like, oh crap, I forgot to do that. And I'll go take care of it. But I will get it up as soon as I can if I remember. Weekends are just tough because I'm in 30 different directions on the weekends. So again, last call for questions. Everybody seems pretty happy. All right, cool guys. Have some liquefaction fun and we'll see you all in a week.